My first question is a simple one, but it reveals a lot about a person. In and Out or Five Guys?
In and Out.
Why?
It's just a Southern Cal thing for me. The taste is like no other hamburger out there. So
Yeah.
Equality.
Yeah, that's for sure there, for sure.
Welcome to Season 2 of 10 Questions with 10 Pastors, brought to you by Gateway Seminary, with your host, Tyler Sanders.
This is 10 Questions with 10 Pastors. I almost said it backwards, which I do all the time. I'm here with Hector Medina, who is lead pastor of Saved by Grace Church in Pomona.
Yes.
And you also work for Send Network as a church planning catalyst, right?
I do. Mm-hmm.
And you're a current MDiv student. You started with us, and now you're with Southwestern.
Yes.
Yeah? Almost done. Got 1 year left.
Absolutely.
Nice. That's really good. Now, for the real questions, I was wondering if you could tell me how you became a Christian.
Yeah. Well, I'm from the city of Pomona, not too far from here, and born and raised there, the south part of the city, and basically was born into the gang life there, and very young, 11 years old, started that type of lifestyle. And so that just grew into very, very bad, I guess, lifestyle. It grew. And long story short, that's my background. And one day, I was already married. I had one child already out of the 6 that I have now. I had one child. Everything was really bad. My wife was going to leave me. I was involved in other things that weren't good, and it was all chaos. It was all bad. I was having a really hard time, and in the middle of a heated argument one time about divorce, someone knocked at my door. Didn't know who it was, and just opened the door, and it was someone that I hadn't seen for years. Didn't know how I got my address, what he was doing there, but all he said was, you know what, I just stopped by because I wanted to invite you to church.
Wow.
Right in the middle of a heated argument with my wife, talking about her leaving me and taking my daughter and all these things, and I was like, man, whatever, yeah, give me the address. And he gave me the address, and I knew in my heart that I was losing everything, and I was about to lose what I loved the most, my daughter, my wife. And so I asked her, do you want to go? And she said, yeah, whatever. I'm leaving anyways. And we went. And so we went to this small gathering, and this usher at the door, he embraced me. He said hello to me. He got into my personal space like no one had ever done in my life. Also, no one also wanted to embrace me in life, the person that I was, my family, community, society around me. So I was used to being neglected and all that. And this guy, he just, man, he loved me. He cared for me in a way that it got me really uncomfortable. I think God's Spirit was doing something there in me, and that shook me. That caught my attention on how he was loving on me, and he didn't know me. He didn't know me, kind of this father type thing, which I had no clue about. I had no relationship with my father. And so that I would say that changed my life there instantly, and then the whole gathering happened and everything. But that moment there showed me Jesus, that moment there. Yeah. It wasn't the sermon, and it wasn't a bad sermon or anything like that, but that moment there just showed me that love of Jesus that I had not experienced or seen through anyone, even family. And so that changed my life. Obviously, I made a commitment in my life to start walking with Jesus, and that process began there.
Yeah.
Long story short.
Sure. That's a great story. Well, tell me a little bit about your ministry. You described it earlier as a replant. How'd you get called into ministry, and how did you get in this church?
Yeah. So, I started walking with Jesus, and my heart already was excited and encouraged about sharing my story with others. I didn't know scripture. I didn't know any of that, but I wanted to share what had happened to me. And so started reading, and I come across this scripture that I still use today when I talk to people about ministry, which is this demon-possessed man in Luke 8, and where Jesus comes and he has this encounter with him. He's naked. He's even mentally ill, and all these components that I identified with, and he's healed, and he wants to go with Jesus, and Jesus says, "No, go back to your people, go back to your community." And so that there has been this platform for me to go into the community and into the city, into the people that I knew. That I think that was like super part of my calling.
Yeah.
Initially there, and then others just started affirming, telling me like, "Look, man, you're gonna do some things in leadership," and I'll be like, "No, I just want to share Jesus," and just slowly started working in these initiatives of justice in my community. That's how I wanted to share Jesus, the gospel, the hope, and started working in justice, practical needs with the community, started getting involved with the community. And that slowly started it was a path, to start even learning, getting in mentors around me.
Sure.
Like Ruben Reyes around me and things like that. And that slowly started shaping that path of calling into ministry, of ultimately being called to be a pastor, of a Spanish church, which is, I have this tremendous love for the Hispanic community of Pomona.
Yeah.
There's 75,000 Hispanics in Pomona, and I have this strong, just healthy burden for my city that they would meet and know Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little about the replant process?
Yeah. Sorry, that
was good. It was a two-part question. I gave you too much.
Replant. Yeah. So I planted for the first time in 2014.
Okay.
And that said, in our context, Hispanic context, most of the time, the planting means we'll pray for you, and then you're off on your own, and God be with you.
Right.
And kind of that was how my journey was. And so when you do that, when that happens, there's this high risk, there's this potential for you to get unhealthy in the way, because you have no mentorship, there's no seminary, there's no training, there's no residency, there's none of that. You've raised your hand to Jesus and said, yes, I'll go. But there's these other important factors, right, that are good. And so not having that, kind of doing it backwards, right, I feel that it started getting unhealthy in different ways, especially culturally. Hispanic folks, there's this way of doing ministry that needs, right, the pastor needs to do A, B, C, and D if you're a pastor, right?
Right.
And so I started slowly falling into that.
Yeah.
And then congregational wise, also, like, the congregation needs to be like this, and so I always knew I wanted to make a difference and make an impact, not for credit, but for the hope of the gospel to really penetrate lostness and darkness in Pomona. And I knew I was feeling that wasn't it. Now, the church was growing. We were up to like 100 and something members, which is in Hispanic. That's you've made it. You've reached success.
Yeah.
But inside of me, I knew it wasn't okay. It wasn't right. And so I think I started deteriorating in my own life, neglecting even my family, to continue this success or pursuing that. And so that kept happening. Finally, there was a point in my life, also being mentored by Ruben, talking to Ruben, said, look, this is not what God's Spirit is leading us to. It looks on paper, it looks okay, optics, but this is not it. And would you agree? All these questions. And so finally we got to this point where we had to shut down, right? Close that part of our ministry. And for the sake of families, for the sake of also my family, for the sake that what we'd been called to, or at least what we felt we'd been called to, would really play out and be unfolded, which was this shot at Hispanic healthy ministry. And all that, there's a lot more, but all that just in a general way came to an end. We got ready we rested a little bit, got ready for our next season, went into this residency with Solid Rock, with Ruben Reyes, which has been a mentor to me. He's one of my best friends, a dude that I respect a lot, and he's just a great guy. I mean, this guy's way younger than me, and he's been an incredible human being in my life. And so he brought me in, he took me in and started helping me. Went through residency, got ready, and then finally we even through Send Network we launched again, and we replanted. And so now with a different mindset with culture, what that meant for us in our context, what we needed to have and what we didn't need to have, what we weren't going to fall into this mentality. We weren't going to let these chains of culture just continue to drag us.
Yeah.
We would be healthy. We would stop and be like, hey, we'll through God's Spirit, we'll continue this, and that's kind of our journey still, today, being that it's recent, 2021.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was painful.
Yeah.
It's been painful. But it's been healthy.
Yeah.
It's been healthy. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. It sounds like in the last 2 years, probably, maybe more, you kind of went through a whole process of just, rethinking all this stuff.
Yes.
You usually ask this question like this. I say, what are you reading right now?
Yeah.
Could you tell me some stuff you read during that process? What are some books that maybe helped you?
Yeah. So, throughout that time, there was a lot of books in Spanish, but in English, I remember reading Lead from Paul Tripp.
Okay.
I remember reading the pastor's ministry, Brian Croft, Things of Leadership and Healthy Pastoral Ministry.
Yeah.
was what Ruben was feeding me.
Yeah.
To get that foundation. I was reading Mark Dever, discipleship, a few things like that.
Yeah.
For ministry.
Yeah.
So he was giving me kind of like this balanced diet.
Yeah.
Aside from the residency, right, which included, Old Testament, New Testament, history, all these things. So I was really getting beefed up in a good way, and but those are some of the books that I was reading at that time to understand, and it was good because I didn't have that pressure. I didn't have that pressure of the church. Then obviously,
I see.
Pandemic, hit, and so then everything was like.
Right. Everything's reset.
Everything's reset. So that also, in a way, helped this season for me.
Yeah, sure.
And SPG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, when you preach, so how do you approach big picture? Like, do you do a series? Do you dig into like a whole book of the Bible? What's your big picture approach to preaching? You
know what? That's I appreciate that question. I would say I'm doing a couple of things, a couple of different approaches to that to see what is going to fit our context, the I guess the DNA maybe of our church. So I would say I've not figured out which one I would probably stick to.
Yeah.
But series is something that we've been doing right now. Digging into a book. We're in the book of James right now.
Oh yeah.
And so we've done Acts, we've done Matthew, and so just watching the reaction of our people, of our context, our just to be completely honest and bold here, our people, they're bivocational people, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of education in our community, not a lot of understanding to big words, right? To even the Greek. Right, all these things, and so a lot of the education as a Hispanic preacher and pastor that you do have needs to be put into terms that are going to bring conviction, they're going to bring all these things that they need in their spiritual walk, and so series has also been a great part. I think that has caught the attention and been made sense to our context. So we've done that. For example, I'm already prepped for this kind of the rest of the year with that approach of series, because I think I've seen it make a good impact in our people.
Yeah.
So series, we've been working on that. We're about to do Who's Your One. We have a whole month there to on mission and community. We'll continue with one of generosity and things like that. So I'm kind of prepped already for the rest of the year. To work on that.
Yeah. And what's your week to week process like on sermon prep? Like, do you have like a schedule of preparing it?
Yeah. So like kind of going off of what I just said, I kind of know already like the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And so with time, I as I get closer, I'm approaching. And so I kind of use like this funnel approach. You know, there's all these ideas and thoughts of that subject, of that series. But then as days go by, right, you're working on it every day. And so that funnel starts to get to when you finally get it where you think at least, you know, it's you're ready for that series or for that message. And that's kind of my approach to that. Obviously, you know, a conversation with God and you know, leaning into him, see what he wants, things like that, all those. But my approach every day is to work on it every day. And until we finally feel kind of okay. That's what we're doing.
What do you think the most difficult passage or topic you've preached on is?
You know, culturally for us, generosity is one of the biggest problems for our culture. It could be taken to either extreme, and it's not good. And so we're trying to get our culture and our community to a good biblical perspective, right? That it's not manipulative in a bad way. It's understanding through God's word that we are to be generous, right? But not taking it to in our culture. There's a lot of Spanish televangelists and
I see maybe
social
prosperity
media.
gospel kind of things.
And
like,
so there's all these things that speak into our people. And so then I have to come and really figure out this way of, yes, we are to be generous, right? But explain that. What does that mean? And not just use scriptures, right? So in Corinthians, right, chapter 9, Paul uses this analogy of farming, right? And so in Hispanic context, people will use that. They'll use Malachi, right? They'll use these things because you are to do so, but there's no explaining, there's no walking with people in regards to what that means. So it's just thrown out there as a rule. And so for us, that's been one of the hardest ones to talk about because we want to do it well. We want to do it right. And so that's, for me, it's been one of the hardest ones because people are paying attention because they're used to Hispanic preachers and pastors going up there to specifically talk about that in a way that they want to. There's an angle to that. Right. And so my fear and my hope and everything that I do with that is that I would share a message and God's Spirit would really convict, right? And this generosity heart would be born, you know, and we would, which is, if you look at the big picture, Hispanics, we struggle a lot with that area, even in our churches, our ministries, you know, our budgets, things like that. It is a problem. It is a big problem, but I think it's a condition of the heart. It starts there. It's not so much sometimes of how much we make or the cost of life. All those things matter, but at the end of the day, the biggest problem is the condition of the heart. And so that's been one of the hardest things for me to navigate and to helping our community reach that point of good health biblically and being okay with that, being convicted and being like, you know what, I understand that, I get that, I love that, and I wanna worship in that way, even, you know.
Right. Could you tell me a swing and a miss you've had in ministry?
Man, I can tell you 1,000. I can tell you 1,000 of those.
That's what everyone says. There's so many.
It's. I think again, context culture for me has been organization and the structure of the church, keeping it consistent. It's there's been times where on paper it looks so good. But then you look at it and you're like, we're everywhere or nowhere at all. And it comes from ultimately from me, again, because in our culture, that's not a thing, or it's not a value or importance. Now to us, it is. It's been to the work has been getting it to that point where we're consistent, persevering on having, that structure, and so organized even, so it's something that every week I have to work on. So I have to share that, transmit that to our team, right? To our team, and then so it's every week conversations. For example, because of that, we have our gatherings Sundays. And then I meet with our team every week, at least for 2 hours, because we need it. We need it to get to a point where we're okay, we're healthy, we're doing it well with the structure, and we're not just all over the place.
Right,
we're doing things like that. So
yeah.
Okay,
Here's my last question: if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself your first year in ministry?
Man, I need people around me, mentors, good, healthy, experienced people that care, that really care for a new planter, for a new pastor, that really have that heart, and just have the willingness to submit and to surrender. I do see this thing from the part of being like a educated with seminary, and not only seminary, but there's this kind of like pride and arrogance sometimes.
Yeah.
And so we won't allow others to come in and to pour in and be like, and that's a downfall, I believe. And so I would just say, look, man, take that first year, 2-3 years to really lean into that person, that's going to love you and care for you. And that's going to tell you like, hey man, look, I don't think that's the best way, or the best approach.
Yeah.
Hey, look, you're out there too much. Your wife, your kids need you.
Right.
You're not gonna. Ruben would constantly, and to this day, tells me you're not the savior of the Pomona Valley. He tells me, and sometimes in the middle of vision and all that, you're inspired. That's not always what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And so I've been so grateful to have him, Hunter Bingham, around me to stop, and to tell me. And so I would tell someone, or I would tell myself, hey, surround yourself with that person, that too. It's not a lot, there's not a lot out there for you, but 1-2 that will care for you, that do want to see you succeed, or to be healthy, more than succeeding, but to be healthy. Man, I think it would change the path, change the life of that pastor and that planter.
Yeah. That's a good word.
Man. Yeah, so important.
Yeah. Thank you, Hector. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.